My name is Rebecca Thompson. I'm 29 years old, a marketing manager at a creative agency here in Portland, Oregon, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I worked my way through college, landed a solid career, saved every dollar I could, and 3 years ago, I bought my dream condo in the Pearl District. 2 bedrooms, 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. It was mine. Every payment, every piece of furniture, every carefully chosen paint color represented years of sacrifice and discipline. I was proud of what I'd built, proud of my independence. Then came that family dinner at Mama Rosa's, the Italian place my parents always picked for special occasions. I thought we were just getting together for my dad's birthday. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I showed up in a good mood wearing my favorite blazer, carrying a gift bag with the watch he'd been eyeing for months. The restaurant smelled like garlic bread and marinara sauce, the kind of warm, comforting atmosphere that makes you think everything is right with the world. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my mom waving me over with that tight smile she wears when she's about to spring something on you. My sister Michelle was there too, looking unusually smug, twirling her wine glass like she was starring in her own reality show. I should have known right then that something was coming, but I sat down, ordered my usual chicken piccata, made small talk about work and the weather. Then, right between the appetizers and the main course, my father cleared his throat in that authoritative way he does when he's about to make a pronouncement. He looked at me with this expression that was half expectant, half demanding, like he was doing me some grand favor. Rebecca, your mother and I have made a decision. We're moving in with you. Tomorrow. Not asking. Not discussing. Announcing. Like it was already settled, like my home, my sanctuary, my hard-earned space was just an extension of their plans. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke. But she just nodded, dabbing her lips with her napkin. It makes the most sense, sweetheart. You have that extra bedroom just sitting empty. My father leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. We've already packed most of our things. The movers are coming in the morning. We figured we'd give you a heads up tonight so you can prepare. Prepare. As if 24 hours was sufficient notice to have your entire life upended. My sister Michelle sipped her wine, barely suppressing a smile. She knew. She'd known this was coming, and she hadn't warned me. The betrayal stung almost as much as the announcement itself. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried not to make a scene in the middle of a crowded restaurant. Wait, what do you mean you're moving in? What happened to your house in Beaverton? My mother's face flickered with something, annoyance maybe, or discomfort. She exchanged a glance with my father before answering. We decided to downsize. It was time for a change. Downsize. The word hung in the air, hollow and unconvincing. Their house in Beaverton was a comfortable 3-bedroom suburban home with a big backyard and a 2-car garage. Why would they suddenly need to downsize into my 1,000-square-foot condo? And why wouldn't they have discussed this with me first, asked if I was okay with it, treated me like an adult capable of making decisions about my own home? I looked at Michelle again, searching her face for some clue, some explanation. She just shrugged, twirling pasta onto her fork. It'll be good for you to have family around, Becca. You work too much anyway. The dismissiveness in her tone made my blood simmer. Good for me. As if I'd been lonely, as if I'd been struggling, as if I hadn't been thriving in my independence. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, to ask all the questions exploding in my head. But we were in public, surrounded by other diners enjoying their meals, and I'd been raised to keep family business private. So I swallowed my protests, forced a weak smile, and said I needed to think about it. My father's expression hardened. There's nothing to think about, Rebecca. We're your parents. This is what families do. They help each other. The word help felt like a slap. Help implied I'd asked for assistance, that I was in need of rescue. I wasn't. I was doing just fine on my own, better than fine. But pointing that out would only make me sound ungrateful, selfish, all the labels they'd throw at me if I resisted. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted my food, barely heard the conversation swirling around me. My mind was racing, trying to understand what was really happening. Why this felt less like a family decision and more like a hostile takeover. When the check came, my father didn't reach for it. I ended up paying just like I always do, adding insult to injury. As we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, my mother hugged me a little too tight, whispering in my ear that she was so grateful I was being so understanding. But I hadn't agreed. I hadn't said yes. I'd just been too shocked to say no. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred past me as I navigated the familiar streets back to my building. When I pulled into the underground parking garage and rode the elevator up to the 10th floor, I stood outside my door for a long moment before unlocking it. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. My navy blue couch positioned perfectly to catch the sunset through the windows. My bookshelves organized by color, a design choice my mother had once called impractical but I loved. The kitchen counters clear except for my coffee maker and a small succulent plant. The silence was peaceful, not lonely. This was my space, my refuge from the chaos of the world, and now it was about to be invaded. I dropped my purse on the entryway table and walked through my condo slowly, seeing it through new eyes. The guest bedroom I turned into a home office, with my desk positioned near the window, my vision board on the wall, my yoga mat rolled up in the corner. Would that become my parents' room? Would my father's sports memorabilia replace my carefully curated motivational quotes? Would my mother's collection of porcelain figurines crowd my minimalist shelves? The thought made me nauseous. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring out at the city. Portland sparkled below me, the bridges lit up over the Willamette River, the downtown buildings glowing against the dark October sky. I worked so hard to get here, to build this life. And now, with one announcement over dinner, it felt like it was all slipping away. Something didn't add up. My parents weren't the type to downsize without a compelling reason. My father took pride in that house, in the perfectly maintained lawn, in the garage where he kept his tools organized like a hardware store. My mother loved hosting holiday dinners, spreading out in the space, having room for all her decorating whims. Why would they give that up to cram into my much smaller condo? And why the rush? Why tomorrow? The more I thought about it, the more questions bubbled up. Had they really sold the house? Or were they renting it out? And if they'd sold it, where was the money? That house had to be worth at least $700,000, maybe more given the Portland market. Even after paying off their mortgage, they should have had a significant amount of cash. Enough to rent a nice apartment somewhere, enough to give themselves options. Unless the money was already gone. I thought about Michelle's smug expression at dinner, the way she'd avoided my eyes, the little smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She knew something. She'd always been the golden child, the baby of the family who could do no wrong even when she was clearly doing everything wrong. She'd bounced from job to job, venture to venture, always with some grand plan that never quite materialized. 6 months ago, she'd been all excited about opening a wellness spa, some boutique fitness studio concept that combined yoga, meditation, and high-end beauty treatments. She'd talked about it endlessly at family gatherings, showing us mood boards and business plans that looked impressive, but seemed financially shaky. At the time, I'd asked her how she was funding it. She'd been vague, mentioning investors and small business loans, but never giving concrete details. My parents had beamed with pride, praising her entrepreneurial spirit, her creativity, her courage to follow her dreams. When I gently pointed out that the Portland market was saturated with wellness studios and the overhead costs seemed astronomical, my mother had accused me of being negative. "You're just jealous," she'd said. "You've always been jealous of your sister's free spirit." Free spirit. That was the family code for irresponsible. Michelle's free spirit had cost my parents money before. They'd bailed her out of credit card debt twice, co-signed on a car loan she defaulted on, and paid her rent during a 6-month period when she was between jobs and supposedly finding herself. I'd never asked them for anything beyond that one-time gift of $10,000 toward my condo down payment, a gift I tried to refuse because I wanted to do it entirely on my own. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But my father had insisted, saying every parent wants to help their child buy their first home. I'd accepted it graciously, thanking them profusely, making it clear I didn't expect or need more. That $10,000 was sitting in my mind now like a ticking time bomb. Would they try to use it against me? Claim some kind of ownership stake in my home because of it? I pulled out my phone and opened my text messages. I needed to talk to someone outside the family dynamics who could give me an objective perspective. I scrolled to David Park's name. David and I had gone to Portland State together, suffering through statistics classes and late-night study sessions. He'd gone on to law school, specializing in real estate law, and now worked at a firm downtown. We'd stayed friends over the years, meeting for coffee every few months, texting about work frustrations and sharing restaurant recommendations. If anyone could help me figure out what was really going on, it was David. I typed out a message, trying to keep it casual even though my hands were shaking. Hey David, weird question. Can you look up property records for me? Need to check if my parents actually sold their house. I'll explain more later, but it's kind of urgent. I hit send before I could second guess myself. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. He was online. The response came quickly. Of course. Send me the address and I'll pull the records tomorrow morning. Everything okay? I sent him my parents' Beaverton address and replied, I hope so. Thanks for this. His response was simple. Anytime. That's what friends are for. I set my phone down and took another sip of wine, feeling slightly better knowing I'd have answers soon. But the knot in my stomach remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something much worse than a simple downsizing decision. The way my parents had announced their plans, the lack of discussion, the arbitrary timeline, Michelle's knowing smile. It all pointed to something calculated, something that had been decided without any regard for my feelings or my life. I walked into my guest bedroom, my home office, and looked around. My desk was covered with client folders and color swatches for an upcoming campaign. My bulletin board held pinned ideas and inspiration images. This room represented my career, my creativity, my professional identity. The thought of packing it all up, of surrendering this space to my parents, felt like giving up a piece of myself. I'd spent 3 years making this condo exactly what I wanted. The soft gray walls I'd painted myself one weekend. The floating shelves I'd installed to display my books and travel souvenirs. The gallery wall of black and white photography I'd collected from local artists. Every corner of this place told the story of who I'd become. Independent and self-sufficient. And now my parents wanted to move in and rewrite that story. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning through scenarios. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they really did just want to be closer to family, to simplify their lives. Maybe I was being selfish for not immediately welcoming them with open arms. But then I'd remember the way my father had said it, not asked it. The way my mother had already decided which room would be theirs. The way Michelle had looked at me like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't understand yet. No, something was definitely wrong. And I was going to find out what it was before they showed up at my door with moving boxes and expectations. The next morning came too fast. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning, checking my phone every hour, hoping David had somehow pulled those property records in the middle of the night. By 6 a.m. I gave up on sleep and made coffee, standing by my kitchen window watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. Portland was waking up below me. Early commuters crossing the bridges, joggers hitting the waterfront path. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for someone to push. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mother. Good morning, sweetheart. The movers should be there around 10. We'll arrive shortly after with some groceries to stock the kitchen. So excited to be closer to you. The casual cheerfulness of the message made my jaw clench. Hadn't agreed to this. I'd said I needed to think about it. But apparently my need to think didn't factor into their plans. I called Jessica, my best friend and coworker at Fusion Digital. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. This better be good, Becca. It's not even 7. I'm freaking out, I said, my voice cracking slightly. My parents announced last night that they're moving into my place. Today. There was a pause. Then Jessica's voice came back sharper, more alert. Wait, what? They're doing what? I filled her in on the dinner, the announcement, the vague explanations, the suspicious timing. Jessica listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved about her. She didn't rush to reassure or dismiss. She let me get it all out. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. Okay, first of all, that's completely insane. Second, you know you can say no, right? Your home isn't a hotel. You're allowed to have boundaries. Boundaries. The word felt foreign, almost rebellious. I'd spent my whole life being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who didn't make waves or cause problems. Saying no to my parents felt like violating some unspoken rule, like I'd be branded selfish or ungrateful. But Jessica was right. This was my home. I had every right to say no, to demand a real conversation, to insist on being treated like an adult whose opinions mattered. What do? I asked, hating how helpless I sounded. You call them right now and tell them the movers need to turn around, Jessica said firmly. Tell them you need more time, that this isn't something you agreed to, and that you're not comfortable with them moving in without a real discussion. She made it sound so simple, so straightforward. But the thought of actually making that call, of hearing my father's disappointed anger or my mother's wounded guilt tripping, made my chest tight. What if they really are in trouble? I said. What if they actually have nowhere else to go? Then they can explain that to you like adults instead of steamrolling your life, Jessica countered. Look, I love you, but you have a massive blind spot when it comes to your family. They've been taking advantage of your good nature for years, and you keep letting them because you're afraid of being the bad guy. You're not the bad guy for having boundaries. Her words hit hard because they were true. I'd spent so long trying to prove I was just as worthy of love and attention as Michelle, trying to be low maintenance and easy and never a burden, that I'd forgotten I was allowed to take up space, to have needs, to say no. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. I'll call them. Good, Jessica said. And if you need backup, I'm working from home today. Call me after and let me know how it goes. We hung up and I stared at my phone, my mother's cheerful text still glowing on the screen. I pulled up her number and hit call before I could chicken out. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and energetic. Rebecca, good morning. Did you get my text about the movers? Mom, we need to talk, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm and measured. I didn't agree to you moving in. I said I needed time to think about it. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted slightly, an edge creeping in. Oh honey, don't be dramatic. It's already arranged. The movers are on their way. I gripped my phone tighter. That's the problem, Mom. You arranged everything without actually getting my permission. This is my home. I need to be part of this decision. I could hear her sigh, that long-suffering sound she made when she thought I was being difficult. Rebecca, we're your parents. We raised you, we supported you, we helped you buy that condo. The least you can do is let us stay with you when we need a place. There it was. The guilt trip wrapped in a reminder of that $10,000 gift. I'd known it was coming, but it still stung. That $10,000 was a gift, Mom. You said it was a gift, not a down payment on future expectations. And you never told me you needed a place to stay. You announced you were moving in. There's a difference. Her voice turned sharper. Why are you being so selfish about this? Is it really that big of a deal to help your family? We're not asking you to build us a mansion. We just need somewhere to stay for a little while. How long is a little while? I asked. A few weeks? A few months? A year? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you've already decided this is permanent. She didn't answer right away, which told me everything I needed to know. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight. We're your parents, Rebecca. We shouldn't have to negotiate for your love and support. That's not what this is about, I said, my frustration rising. This is about respecting my space and my life. You can't just decide to move into someone's home without discussing it with them first, family or not. I heard my father's voice in the background asking what was wrong. My mother's voice became muffled as she covered the phone, clearly talking to him. Then he was on the line, his tone authoritative and brooking no argument. Rebecca, what's this nonsense your mother is telling me? We're moving in today. The movers are already on their way. You need to be there to let them in. Dad, I'm not letting anyone in, I said, my heart pounding. I didn't agree to this, and I'm not comfortable with you moving in without a real conversation about what's going on. His voice rose. What's going on is that we're your parents and we need a place to stay. You have a spare room. This shouldn't even be a discussion. Why do you need a place to stay? I pushed back. What happened to your house? There was a beat of silence and I knew I'd hit a nerve. That's none of your concern, he said finally. Our financial decisions are our business. If they're affecting me and my home, then they are my business, I said, surprised by my own boldness. I'm not trying to be difficult, Dad. I just need to understand what's really happening here. You're being disrespectful, he said, his voice cold. We'll be there at 10 whether you like it or not. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, my hand shaking, my heart racing. I just stood up to my parents for the first time in my life, and it felt both terrifying and empowering. But they were still coming. They'd made that clear. And I had less than 3 hours to figure out what to do next. I sat on my couch staring at my phone after my father hung up on me, my entire body vibrating with adrenaline. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd feared, with my parents dismissing my concerns and bulldozing forward with their plans regardless of how I felt. But something had shifted inside me during that call. For the first time, I'd actually pushed back, actually asked the questions that needed asking instead of just accepting whatever they told me. And their reactions, the defensiveness, the anger, the refusal to explain, only confirmed what my gut had been screaming since last night. Something was very wrong with this situation. I looked around my condo, this space I'd created from nothing, this testament to my independence and hard work. The morning light was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the glass coffee table I'd saved up for, illuminating the abstract painting I'd bought from a local artist at the Saturday market. Every single item in this place had a story, a memory, a piece of myself embedded in it. The thought of my parents arriving in a few hours with moving trucks and expectations made my stomach twist into knots. I couldn't let this happen. I wouldn't. But I also couldn't just lock them out and pretend they weren't my parents. The situation required strategy, information, and most importantly, proof of what was really going on. I texted David again, my fingers flying across the screen. Any chance you can prioritize those property records? My parents are supposedly moving into my place in 3 hours, and I need to know what's really happening. His response came within minutes. Already on it. Give me an hour. Heading into the office now. I thanked him and then did something I rarely did. Called in sick to work. Well, not sick exactly. I texted my boss and told her I had a family emergency and needed to work from home today. It wasn't even a lie. This definitely qualified as an emergency. With that handled, I made myself a second cup of coffee and forced myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. What did I actually know? My parents had announced they were moving in. They claimed to have sold their house and needed to downsize. They refused to explain their financial situation. Michelle had looked smug and knowing at dinner. And they expected me to simply comply without question. What did I suspect? That they'd given money to Michelle for her wellness spa venture. That the business was probably failing or had already failed. That they were broke or close to it because of their choice to fund my sister's dream. That they saw my condo as their backup plan, their safety net, without considering that I might have feelings about becoming their involuntary landlord. But suspicions weren't enough. I needed facts. I needed proof. And I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I could make any decisions about how to handle it. I opened my laptop and started searching. Michelle's wellness spa was called Serenity Heights Studio. I found their website easily enough, a sleek design with photos of pristine yoga studios, meditation rooms, and spa treatment areas. The services listed were extensive and expensive. Hot stone massages for $150, private yoga sessions for $200, meditation retreats for $1,500 per weekend. The prices alone told me they were targeting a very specific demographic, the kind of wealthy Portlanders who had money to burn on wellness and self-care. I clicked through to their social media pages. Michelle had been posting regularly, all carefully curated images of the space, of herself in various yoga poses, of smiling clients in plush robes holding green smoothies. The comments were mostly supportive, lots of heart emojis and encouraging words from friends and family. But when I looked closer, I noticed something interesting. The posts had dropped off significantly in the past few weeks. The last post was from 12 days ago. A generic motivational quote about inner peace overlaid on a sunset photo. Before that, there'd been daily posts. The sudden silence was telling. I checked their booking page. It claimed to be fully integrated with their scheduling system. But when I tried to book an appointment, I got an error message. Service temporarily unavailable. Please call to schedule. That wasn't a good sign. A legitimate business would have a functioning booking system, especially one that positioned itself as high-end and tech-savvy. I found reviews on Google and Yelp. They were mixed. Some glowing 5-star reviews that read suspiciously like they'd been written by friends or family members. But scattered among them were concerning 1- and 2-star reviews. Overpriced for what you get. Disorganized staff. Tried to book 3 times and kept getting canceled on. Paid for a package and now they won't return my calls. The most recent review was from 5 days ago. Just found out this place is closing down. They took my money for a membership and now won't refund me. Tried calling and the number is disconnected. If anyone knows how to get in touch with the owners, please let me know. I need my $800 back. My heart sank. $800 for a membership. How many other people had paid up front for services they'd never receive? How much money had Michelle and her business partner collected before everything fell apart? And more importantly, how much of my parents' money had gone into this disaster? I scrolled through Michelle's personal Instagram next, looking for clues. Her feed was a carefully constructed highlight reel of her supposedly perfect life. Photos of green smoothies and acai bowls. Selfies in expensive athletic wear. Pictures of her in the studio space before it opened, beaming with excitement and possibility. And then, about a month ago, photos of a stunning townhouse. The caption read, "New beginnings in Lake Oswego. Grateful for this beautiful space and the opportunities ahead." The photos showed a modern kitchen with marble countertops, a living room with vaulted ceilings and a gas fireplace, a backyard with a hot tub. The place had to be worth at least $600,000 or $700,000. Lake Oswego was one of the most expensive areas in the Portland metro, known for its luxury homes and wealthy residents. How could Michelle, who'd never held a stable job for more than 18 months, afford a place like that? The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture I really didn't want to see. My parents had sold their house in Beaverton. That house had to be worth at least $700,000, probably more given how much Portland real estate had appreciated in recent years. They'd given that money, or most of it, to Michelle. She'd used it to buy the townhouse in Lake Oswego and to fund Serenity Heights Studio. The business had failed spectacularly from the looks of it. And now my parents had no house, no money, and nowhere to go except my place. Meanwhile, Michelle was sitting in a luxury townhouse that my parents had essentially bought for her, probably telling herself and everyone else that it was all just a temporary setback, that the business would recover, that everything would work out. The unfairness of it burned in my chest like acid. I worked for everything I had. Put myself through college taking out loans and working part-time jobs. Lived with roommates in terrible apartments to save money. Ate ramen and rice for years while I built my savings. And when I finally bought my condo, I'd done it with minimal help, just that one gift from my parents that I tried to refuse. Michelle, on the other hand, had drifted through life expecting everything to be handed to her. And it had been. Over and over again. Our parents had always bailed her out, always made excuses for her, always treated her failures as learning experiences while treating my successes as expected, unremarkable. And now they'd given her everything, literally everything, and expected me to pick up the pieces. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We're leaving Beaverton now. Should be there by 10:30. Please have the guest room cleared out for us." The casualness of it, the assumption that I'd just comply, made my blood boil. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Jessica back. She answered immediately. "How'd it go?" she asked. "About as well as expected," I said. "They're still coming. Dad basically told me they'll be here whether I like it or not." "That's not okay, Becca," Jessica said firmly. "That's not how this works. You're an adult with your own home. They can't just force their way in." "I know," I said, running my hand through my hair. "But I don't know how to stop them without completely blowing up the family." "Do you want to stop them?" Jessica asked. "Or do you want to let them move in and just be miserable about it? Because those are your two options here." "I want answers first," I said. "My friend David is pulling property records to confirm what they did with their house. Once I have proof, I can confront them with facts instead of just suspicions." "Smart," Jessica said. "But what if the facts confirm what you already know? What then?" "Then I guess I decide whether I'm willing to be their backup plan," I said quietly. "Whether I'm willing to sacrifice my space and my peace because they chose to give everything to Michelle." There was a pause, and then Jessica spoke more gently. "You know what I think? I think you've already decided. You're just scared to follow through." She was right. I was scared. Scared of being seen as the selfish daughter. Scared of family gossip and judgment. Scared of my mother's tears and my father's anger. Scared of being cut off, disowned, labeled as the one who turned her back on family. But I was also angry. Angrier than I'd been in a long time. An anger I was discovering could be clarifying. My phone rang. David. I answered immediately. Tell me, I said. It's not good, Becca, he said, his voice somber. Your parents sold their house 3 weeks ago for $725,000. After paying off their remaining mortgage, they cleared about $680,000. My stomach dropped even though I'd been expecting it. And where did the money go? I asked, though I already knew. That's where it gets interesting, David said. The funds were transferred to a trust account and then dispersed to 2 places. $450,000 went to purchase a property in Lake Oswego under your sister's name. The rest, about $230,000, went to a business account for something called Serenity Heights Studio LLC. Your sister is listed as the primary owner. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. So they gave her everything. Pretty much, David confirmed. The Lake Oswego property is solely in her name. The business is registered to her and someone named Brittany Coleman. Your parents aren't listed on any of the paperwork. They gave her almost $700,000 and didn't even protect themselves legally, I said, incredulous. Looks that way, David said. I'm sorry, Becca. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, it's exactly what I needed to hear, I said. Can you send me copies of everything? Already done, he said. Check your email. And Becca, if you need legal advice on how to handle your parents trying to move in, I'm here. You have rights as a homeowner. They can't just take over your space. I know, I said. Thank you, David. Seriously. Anytime, he said. Take care of yourself. We hung up and I immediately opened my email. David had sent a PDF with all the property records, the sale documents, the transfer records, everything. It was all there in black and white. Irrefutable proof that my parents had chosen to give my sister everything, and were now expecting me to house them as a consequence of that choice. I forwarded the email to myself on my phone so I'd have it easily accessible. Then I sat back and tried to process what I was feeling. Betrayal, definitely. Anger, absolutely. But also something else. A strange sense of relief. Because now I knew. I wasn't imagining things or being paranoid. My suspicions had been correct. My parents had lied to me, had chosen Michelle over me yet again. And were now trying to manipulate me into being their safety net, without even having the decency to be honest about it. The doorbell rang. I glanced at my phone. 9:45. They were early. Of course they were. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother was standing there looking impatient, my father beside her checking his watch. Behind them in the hallway, I could see 2 guys in moving company uniforms waiting with a dolly stacked with boxes. My heart was pounding but my mind was clear. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let them in. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Rebecca, thank goodness, my mother said, moving forward like she expected me to let her pass. The movers are here and we need to get everything inside before the parking enforcement comes around. I didn't move from the doorway. We need to talk first, I said. My father's eyes narrowed. We can talk while we unload, he said. Let us in, Rebecca. No, I said firmly. We talk first. Then we figure out what happens next. My mother's face crumpled into a wounded expression. Sweetheart, please don't do this. We've had such a long morning already. I'm sure you have, I said. But I'm not letting you move in until you tell me the truth about what's really going on. My father's face was turning red. We've already told you what's going on, he said, his voice rising. We downsized and we need a place to stay. You sold your house for $725,000, I said, watching their faces carefully. You gave $450,000 to Michelle to buy her townhouse in Lake Oswego. You gave another $230,000 to fund her wellness spa. And now that the business has failed and the money's gone, you're expecting me to take you in without even being honest about what happened. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Behind them, the movers shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing they'd walked into a family drama. How did you find out about that? My mother finally whispered. Does it matter? I asked. The point is you lied to me. You made up a story about bad investments and downsizing when the truth is you chose to give everything to Michelle, And now you're dealing with the consequences. That's not fair, my father said. But his voice lacked conviction. What's not fair is expecting me to bail you out without even respecting me enough to tell me the truth, I countered. What's not fair is giving my sister hundreds of thousands of dollars, while I get nothing except the obligation to house you when it all falls apart. We gave you $10,000 for your down payment, my mother said, her voice shaking. We helped you too. That was a gift, Mom, I said. A gift I tried to refuse. And it doesn't come close to $700,000. You made a choice. You chose to give Michelle everything. And that's your right. But you don't get to make that choice and then act like I owe you something because of it. Rebecca, we're your parents, my father said, his authoritative tone returning. You will let us in right now. No, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I won't. Not like this. Not with lies and manipulation. If you want to have an honest conversation about what happened and what you actually need, we can do that. But I'm not letting you move in and take over my home based on deception. My mother started crying loud dramatic sobs that I knew were meant to make me feel guilty. You're throwing us out on the street, she wailed. Your own parents. I'm not throwing you out, I said. You have options. Michelle has a huge townhouse that you paid for. You can stay with her. Or you can use whatever money you have left to rent an apartment. But you don't get to lie to me and then guilt-trip me into compliance. One of the movers cleared his throat. Folks, we're on the clock here. Are we moving this stuff in or not? Not, I said before my parents could answer. I'm sorry for wasting your time. My father looked like he wanted to explode, but he was too aware of the audience we had. He turned to the movers. Take everything back to the storage unit, he said tersely. We'll figure this out later. The movers looked relieved to escape the awkward situation. They wheeled their dolly back toward the elevator, leaving my parents standing in my doorway. My mother was still crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. How could you do this? She said between sobs. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And you treat us like this? You sacrificed for me? I said, my own voice rising now. You paid for Michelle's college while I took out loans. You bought her a car while I rode the bus. You gave her money for rent and credit card bills while I worked 2 jobs to support myself. And now you've given her almost $700,000 while expecting me to just accept whatever crumbs you throw my way. That's not sacrifice, Mom. That's favoritism. And I'm done pretending it's anything else. My father grabbed my mother's arm. Let's go, Pamela, he said. She's made her choice. They turned and walked toward the elevator. My mother looked back at me once, her face a mixture of hurt and anger. You'll regret this, Rebecca, she said. When you're old and alone with no family, you'll remember this moment and regret it. Maybe, I said quietly, but at least I'll have my self-respect. The elevator doors closed on them and I stepped back into my condo, shutting and locking the door. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I felt like I might throw up or cry or both. But underneath the fear and anxiety, there was something else. A tiny seed of pride. I'd done it. I'd stood up to them. I'd refused to be manipulated. I'd chosen myself for once. I walked to my couch and collapsed onto it, my body suddenly heavy with exhaustion. My phone started buzzing immediately. Texts from my mother, long paragraphs about how hurt and betrayed she felt, how she couldn't believe I'd turned my back on family, how disappointed she was in the person I'd become. Texts from my father, shorter and angrier, calling me selfish and ungrateful. And then, surprisingly, a text from Michelle. What the hell, Becca? Mom and Dad are devastated. How could you turn them away? I stared at that last text, anger flaring hot in my chest. I called her. She answered on the first ring. What? She snapped. You have a lot of nerve texting me that, I said, my voice cold. Me? You're the one who just threw our parents out on the street, Michelle said. They're not on the street, I countered. They have options. Like that big expensive townhouse you're living in that they bought for you. There was silence on the other end of the line. That's different, Michelle finally said. How is it different? I asked. They gave you $450,000 for that house. They gave you another $230,000 for your business. And when it all failed, when you burned through their entire life savings, they decided to move in with me instead of asking you to help them. How is that different? The business didn't fail, Michelle said defensively. It's just going through a rough patch. Michelle, your Google reviews say the place is closed, I said. People are trying to get refunds. Your phone number is disconnected. Stop lying. It's not closed, she insisted. We're just reorganizing. Restructuring. It's going to bounce back. Do Mom and Dad know that? I asked. Do they know their money is gone and there's no way you're paying them back? That's none of your business, Michelle said, her voice turning hostile. This is between me and them. It became my business when they showed up expecting to move into my home without even telling me the truth, I said. You knew, didn't you? At dinner last night. You knew they'd given you everything and were planning to move in with me. You thought it was funny. I didn't think it was funny, Michelle said, but she didn't sound convincing. I just thought it made sense. You have the extra space and you're always so responsible and put together. They need help right now and you're in a position to give it. So because I've been responsible, because I've worked hard and saved money and built a stable life, I'm now obligated to bail everyone else out? I asked. That's not fair, Michelle. You're being dramatic, she said. It's just temporary. They just need somewhere to stay until I can get the business profitable again. And how long will that take? I asked. Months? Years? Never? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like that business is done. And even if it magically turned around tomorrow, that doesn't change the fact that Mom and Dad gave you everything and expected me to just deal with the consequences. You've always been jealous of me, Michelle said, playing her usual card. Ever since we were kids. You can't stand that they believe in me and my dreams. This isn't about jealousy, I said, exhausted. This is about fairness and honesty. You got $700,000. I got an expectation to house our parents when your dreams fell apart. If you can't see how messed up that is, then we have nothing else to talk about. I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked her number. Then I blocked my parents' numbers too. My hands were still shaking, but I felt clearer than I had in hours. The confrontation was over. I'd drawn my line. And whatever happened next, at least I'd done it on my own terms. I texted, Jessica. It's done. I turned them away. Her response was immediate. Proud of you. Come over tonight. Wine and takeout on me. I thanked her and then just sat in the silence of my condo. The morning sun was higher now, filling the space with warm light. Everything looked exactly as it had when I'd woken up, but somehow it felt different. Lighter. Like a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying had finally lifted. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Rebecca, this is Aunt Karen. Your mother just called me crying about what happened. I don't know all the details, but I have a feeling there's more to this story. Call me when you can. I want to hear your side. I stared at the message. Aunt Karen. My mother's sister, the one who'd always been the black sheep of the family because she'd refused to play along with the dysfunction, who'd moved away and built her own life and maintained firm boundaries. If anyone would understand, it would be her. I saved her number and texted back. Thanks, Aunt Karen. I'll call you this afternoon. There's definitely more to the story. Her response came quickly. I figured as much. Talk soon. I set my phone aside and walked to my bedroom. I needed to change out of the clothes I'd slept in. Needed to shower and try to reset. But first, I stood at my window looking out at Portland spread below me. The city where I'd built my life, my career, my home. The city where I'd finally learned to stand up for myself. Whatever came next, whether my family forgave me or cut me off entirely, I knew I'd made the right choice. I'd chosen truth over comfort, boundaries over obligation, myself over their expectations. And that, I was starting to realize, wasn't selfish at all. It was survival. I stood under the hot shower for a long time, letting the water pound against my shoulders and wash away the tension that had settled into every muscle. My mind kept replaying the confrontation at my door, the look on my parents' faces when I'd confronted them with the truth about the money, the way my mother's tears had turned from manipulative to genuine shock when she realized I actually knew everything. Part of me felt guilty. That old conditioning, that voice that had been installed in my head since childhood, kept whispering that I was being cruel, that family should stick together no matter what, that good daughters don't turn their parents away. But a louder, newer voice was drowning that one out. The voice that reminded me I hadn't created this situation, that I wasn't responsible for fixing my parents' bad decisions, that loving someone didn't mean letting them walk all over me. By the time I got out of the shower and dressed in comfortable clothes, it was almost noon. My stomach was growling, but the thought of food made me nauseous. I made myself some toast anyway. forcing down a few bites while I tried to figure out what to do with the rest of my day. Working felt impossible. My brain was too scattered, too full of adrenaline and emotion to focus on marketing campaigns and client presentations. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who existed outside the toxic family dynamics I just extracted myself from. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Karen back. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Rebecca, honey, I was hoping you'd call. I heard from your mother and let me just say, her version of events sounds like it's missing some crucial details. That's because she's not going to tell you that she and Dad sold their house and gave almost $700,000 to Michelle," I said, getting straight to the point. "Then they lied to me about losing everything and expected me to let them move into my condo, without even asking my permission." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Aunt Karen let out a low whistle. $700,000? To Michelle? For what? "Her wellness spa business," I said. "And to buy her that fancy townhouse in Lake Oswego. They basically handed her their entire life savings, and now that it's gone, they decided I should be their backup plan. Without even having the decency to tell me the truth about what happened." "Jesus," Aunt Karen breathed. "I knew your parents had a blind spot when it came to Michelle, but this is beyond anything I imagined. Did they really think you wouldn't find out?" "I think they thought I'd just go along with it," I said, my voice bitter. "That I'd be the good responsible daughter who asks no questions and makes no waves. They've gotten away with prioritizing Michelle my entire life. Why would they think this time would be any different?" "Because this time they're asking you to sacrifice your home," Aunt Karen said firmly. "This isn't about watching them fawn over Michelle at family dinners or biting your tongue when they bail her out again. This is about them expecting you to give up your space, your peace, your independence because they made terrible financial decisions. You were right to say no." I felt tears prickling at my eyes. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from someone in my family. "You really think so?" I asked. "I know so," Aunt Karen said. "Look, I love my sister. But Pamela has spent 30 years enabling Michelle's irresponsibility, and it's cost her everything. And now she's trying to make you pay for it. That's not okay. Do you know how many times she's called me over the years asking to borrow money for Michelle's latest crisis? I stopped lending to her 15 years ago because I could see the pattern. She's never going to stop rescuing Michelle, as long as someone else is willing to catch them when they fall." I wiped at my eyes, grateful she couldn't see me getting emotional. "Mom called you crying though?" I asked. "Of course she did," Aunt Karen said with a dry laugh. "Playing the victim is her specialty. But let me guess, she left out the part about lying to you? Left out the part about giving Michelle everything? Probably told you I was heartless and ungrateful?" "She said I threw them out on the street," I confirmed. "Said I'd regret it when I was old and alone with no family." "Classic Pamela manipulation," Aunt Karen said. "Making it about her pain instead of taking any responsibility for her choices." "Did she mention that Michelle has a 3-bedroom townhouse they could stay in? That Michelle is the one who should be housing them considering she has their money?" "No," I said. Somehow that detail didn't make it into her sob story. Aunt Karen sighed. "I'm going to be honest with you, Rebecca. Your mother is going to keep calling people, keep spreading her version of what happened. She's going to try to turn the family against you. You need to be prepared for that." My stomach clenched. I'd been so focused on the immediate confrontation that I hadn't thought about the aftermath, about how my parents would spin this to everyone else. "What should I do?" I asked. "Tell the truth," Aunt Karen said simply. "Don't hide what happened. When people ask, and they will ask, tell them exactly what you told me. Your parents gave Michelle $700,000, lied to you about their situation, and expected you to house them without even asking. Most people will understand. And the ones who don't, the ones who think you should have just gone along with it, well, those aren't people whose opinions you need to worry about." She made it sound so simple, but I knew it wouldn't be. Family loyalty was a powerful thing, especially in my family where questioning the parents was seen as disrespectful no matter how old you were. "What about Michelle?" I asked. She texted me saying Mom and Dad are devastated, acting like I'm the villain here. "Of course she is," Aunt Karen said. "Because if she admits you were right to say no, she has to face the fact that she took everything from your parents and isn't willing to help them now. It's easier to make you the bad guy than to look in the mirror." I heard a knock at my door and tensed immediately. If my parents had come back, if they'd decided to try again, I didn't know if I had the strength to go through another confrontation. "Hold on, Aunt Karen," I said. "Someone's at my door." I walked over and checked the peephole, my heart pounding. But it wasn't my parents. It was Mr. Wu, my elderly neighbor from across the hall. I opened the door. Mr. Wu smiled at me, but his eyes were concerned. "Rebecca, I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to check if everything is okay." I heard some raised voices in the hallway earlier. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry about that, Mr. Wu. Just some family drama. Nothing to worry about." He nodded slowly. Family can be difficult. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but I could not help overhearing some of what was said. "Your parents seemed very upset." I said. "They wanted to move in without asking me first." I had to say no. Mr. Wu's expression shifted to something like approval. "That is wise. A home is a sanctuary. No one should take that from you, not even family." His words, simple and straightforward, hit me with unexpected force. "Thank you, Mr. Wu. That means a lot." He patted my arm gently. "If you need anything, or if they come back and you need a witness, I am right across the hall." I thanked him again and closed the door, feeling oddly comforted by the interaction. I returned to the phone. "Sorry about that, Aunt Karen. That was my neighbor checking on me." He heard the argument in the hallway. "See," Aunt Karen said. "Even strangers can see this isn't right. You're not crazy, Rebecca. You're not selfish. You set a boundary and your parents trampled all over it. Standing firm was the only option." We talked for another 20 minutes, with Aunt Karen sharing stories of her own battles with my mother over the years, the time she'd had to set boundaries and deal with the fallout. By the time we hung up, I felt steadier, more confident in my decision. She'd invited me to visit her in Seattle sometime soon, an offer that felt like a lifeline. At least I had one person in my family who understood. I spent the afternoon trying to distract myself with work emails and catching up on industry news, but my mind kept drifting back to the situation. Around 3 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with texts from numbers I didn't recognize. I quickly realized they were extended family members who'd heard something from my parents and were reaching out. My cousin Trevor sent a brief message. "Hey Becca, your mom called my mom crying about something that happened today. You okay? What's going on?" My Aunt Linda, my father's sister, was less subtle. "Rebecca, your father says you refused to help them when they needed a place to stay. I'm very disappointed in you. Family takes care of family." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling the old guilt trying to creep back in. Aunt Linda had always been judgmental, always quick to weigh in on other people's choices while her own life was far from perfect. But her message still stung. The idea that people were talking about me, forming opinions based on my parents' twisted version of events, made my skin crawl. I decided to take Aunt Karen's advice. I wasn't going to hide or apologize. I was going to tell the truth. I replied to Trevor first. "It's complicated. My parents sold their house and gave the money to Michelle for her business and a new house. When the business failed, they expected to move into my place without even asking me. I said no because they lied to me about the whole situation. I'm okay, just dealing with a lot." His response came quickly. "Whoa, that's heavy. Sorry you're going through that. Let me know if you need anything." To Aunt Linda, I was more direct. "Dad didn't tell you that he and Mom gave Michelle almost $700,000 from their house sale? That they lied to me about losing everything and expected me to house them without any discussion? I'm not refusing to help. I'm refusing to be manipulated." There was no response from Aunt Linda. I didn't expect one. She'd either ignore the information or find a way to twist it into still being my fault. But at least I'd said my piece. Jessica texted me around 4. "Still coming over tonight? I need to know how much wine to open." I smiled despite everything. "Definitely coming. I might need the whole bottle." She sent back a laughing emoji and a promise to have emergency ice cream on standby too. Having friends who supported me unconditionally, who didn't require me to set myself on fire to keep others warm, felt like the most valuable thing in the world right now. I tried calling David to thank him again for getting me the property records so quickly, but he didn't answer. He texted back a few minutes later that he was in a client meeting but wanted to check in with me later. The fact that I had people in my corner, people who believed me and supported my choices, made the disapproval from some family members easier to bear. At 5 o'clock, I finally allowed myself to look at the messages from my parents that I'd been ignoring. My mother had sent 17 texts throughout the day. They started with hurt and confusion, progressed to anger and accusations, and ended with what I recognized as her final manipulation tactic: guilt through martyrdom. The last message read, "I suppose we'll just have to figure this out on our own. I never thought my own daughter would abandon us in our time of need. But I suppose we taught you too well to be independent. We only have ourselves to blame for raising you to put yourself first." The passive-aggressive implication that my independence was somehow a flaw, that caring about my own well-being was selfish, would have worked on me yesterday. Would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and second-guessing. But today, after everything, it just made me tired. I didn't respond. My father's messages were fewer but more direct. 3 texts total. "You're making a huge mistake. Don't come crying to us when you need help someday." And finally, "You're no daughter of mine." That last one hit harder than I wanted to admit. Being disowned, even by parents who'd never really seen me for who I was, still hurt. But I recognized it for what it was: a manipulation tactic. A way to punish me for not complying, to make me afraid of losing them so I'd fall back in line. Well, I wasn't falling in line. Not this time. I screenshot the messages and sent them to Aunt Karen with a brief note. For the record, in case they claim I'm exaggerating. Her response was immediate: "Save everything. Document all of this. You might need it later." That was sobering. The idea that this might escalate to the point where I needed legal documentation hadn't fully occurred to me. But Aunt Karen was right. I needed to protect myself. I created a folder on my phone and started saving screenshots of everything. The property records David had sent. The texts from my parents. Michelle's Instagram posts about her townhouse. The Google reviews of Serenity Heights studio showing it was closed. Anything that proved my version of events was the truth. By 6 o'clock, I was emotionally exhausted but also oddly calm. The worst had happened. I'd stood up to my parents. I'd set a boundary. And I was still standing. The world hadn't ended. I hadn't been struck by lightning for dishonoring my mother and father. I was just a woman in her own home, finally choosing herself over dysfunction. I changed into jeans and a comfortable sweater, grabbed my keys and my phone, and headed out to meet Jessica. The elevator ride down felt different than usual. Lighter somehow. Like I'd shed a heavy coat I'd been wearing my whole life without realizing it. As I walked through the lobby and out into the cool October evening, I thought about what Mr. Wu had said. A home is a sanctuary. No one should take that from you. He was right. And I was done letting anyone try. Jessica lived in the Alphabet District, a trendy neighborhood west of downtown filled with cafes and boutiques and old Victorian houses converted into apartments. Her place was a first-floor unit in one of those Victorians. With high ceilings and original hardwood floors she was always complaining about having to maintain. But she loved it, loved the character and history of the building, loved being walking distance from everything she needed. I knocked on her door and she opened it immediately, pulling me into a hug before I'd even crossed the threshold. "You did it," she said, squeezing me tight. "I'm so proud of you." I hugged her back, feeling some of the tension in my shoulders release. "It was awful," I said. "But I did it." "Come in," she said, ushering me inside. "I've got wine, Thai food from that place you love, and a completely judgment-free zone for whatever you need to process." Her living room was cozy and cluttered in the best way, filled with plants and throw pillows and stacks of books on every surface. She'd already set up the coffee table with takeout containers and 2 very full wine glasses. I collapsed onto her couch and immediately reached for one of the glasses. "Tell me everything," Jessica said, curling up in the armchair across from me with her own wine. "Start from this morning and don't leave anything out." So I did. I told her about the phone call with my parents, about confronting them at my door with the property records, about their shock when they realized I knew about the money. I told her about blocking their numbers, about the texts from extended family, about Aunt Karen's support and my father's disowning message. Jessica listened without interrupting, her face cycling through expressions of anger, sympathy, and fierce pride. When I finished, she raised her wine glass. "To Rebecca Thompson," she said, who finally stopped setting herself on fire to keep her family warm. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling tears threatening again. "Why does doing the right thing feel so terrible?" I asked. Because you were raised to believe that taking care of yourself is selfish, Jessica said. Because your parents spent your whole life conditioning you to put their needs and Michelle's needs above your own. Breaking that conditioning feels wrong because it goes against everything they taught you. But that doesn't mean it is wrong. It just means they did a really good job of making you feel guilty for having boundaries. We ate pad thai and drank wine and talked for hours. Jessica shared her own stories of setting boundaries with her family, of the guilt and pushback she'd faced when she'd stopped being the family peacemaker and started prioritizing her own mental health. It helped to know I wasn't alone, that other people had gone through similar struggles and survived. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again 2 minutes later. Same unknown number. This is getting creepy, I said, showing Jessica the screen. Want me to answer it? She offered. Tell whoever it is to back off? I shook my head. Let me check the voicemail first. I put my phone on speaker and played the message. A woman's voice I didn't recognize filled the room. Hi Rebecca, this is Brittany Coleman. I'm Michelle's business partner at Serenity Heights Studio. I got your number from Michelle. Look, I know there's family drama happening and I don't want to get in the middle of it, but I think you should know something about the money your parents gave us. Can you call me back? It's important. I looked at Jessica, my eyebrows raised. Should I call her back? I don't know, Jessica said. What could she possibly tell you that would change anything? Maybe nothing, I said. But she said it was important. And honestly, I'm curious why Michelle's business partner would be reaching out to me. Could be a trap, Jessica warned. Could be Michelle putting her up to guilt-tripping you. That's possible, I agreed. But I'm going to call her back. I want to hear what she has to say. I stepped out onto Jessica's small back patio for privacy and called the number back. Brittany answered on the first ring. Rebecca, thanks for calling me back. Look, I know this is weird and you don't know me, but I felt like I had to reach out. Okay, I said cautiously. What's this about? It's about the money your parents gave to Michelle and me for the studio, Brittany said. And about why the business failed. I'm guessing Michelle gave you some story about bad luck or the market or whatever. But that's not what happened. The business failed because Michelle was terrible with money and wouldn't listen to anyone. Go on, I said, my heart starting to race. Your parents gave us $230,000, Brittany continued. We were supposed to use it for equipment, marketing, hiring staff, building a client base. But Michelle kept making these impulsive decisions without consulting me. She bought $15,000 massage tables when we could have gotten perfectly good ones for $3,000 each. She insisted on imported Italian tile for the bathroom that cost twice what we budgeted. She hired her friends to do things we could have outsourced cheaper. Every time I tried to talk to her about staying on budget, she'd say her parents trusted her judgment and I should too. I felt sick. So she just burned through the money? Pretty much. Brittany said. And when I finally put my foot down and said we were out of cash, she started taking out loans in the business's name without telling me. We're about $60,000 in debt now on top of having nothing left from your parents' investment. The whole thing is a disaster. I wanted to dissolve the partnership months ago, but Michelle kept insisting it would turn around. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I just found out from Michelle that your parents expected to move in with you after giving her all their money, Brittany said. And that you said no. And honestly, good for you. Michelle has been acting like this is all just bad luck, like she's the victim here. But she's not. She made terrible choices, wasted your parents' money, and now she's sitting in that townhouse they bought for her acting like she deserves sympathy. I thought you should know the truth. I was quiet for a moment, processing. Does Michelle know you're calling me? God no, Brittany said. She'd lose her mind if she knew I was talking to you. But I'm done protecting her. I lost money too in this disaster. And watching her refuse to take any responsibility while your parents are apparently homeless is making me sick. They're not homeless, I said. They have options. They're just mad that I'm not one of them. Good, Brittany said firmly. Stick to your guns. Michelle needs to face consequences for once. Maybe if someone had told her no earlier in her life, we wouldn't all be in this mess. We talked for a few more minutes, with Brittany giving me more details about the business's collapse and Michelle's financial mismanagement. By the time we hung up, I had a much clearer picture of what had happened. My parents hadn't just made a bad investment. They'd enabled Michelle's worst impulses, trusted her with money she had no idea how to manage, and refused to see the warning signs until it was too late. I went back inside where Jessica was waiting with raised eyebrows. "Well?" she asked. "That was Michelle's business partner," I said, collapsing back onto the couch. Apparently Michelle blew through the $230,000 on ridiculous expenses and bad decisions. Then racked up $60,000 in business debt on top of it. The whole thing failed because Michelle is financially incompetent and no one stopped her. Jesus, Jessica breathed. "So your parents basically flushed their life savings down the toilet because they refused to see Michelle for who she really is." "Pretty much," I said. "And now they're facing the consequences and trying to make it my problem." We sat in silence for a moment, both processing. Then Jessica leaned forward, her expression serious. "You know what this means, right?" she said. "You can never let them move in. Because if you do, if you show them that throwing a tantrum and guilting you eventually works, they'll never stop. Every crisis, every bad decision, every time Michelle screws up, they'll come to you expecting you to fix it." "I know," I said. "I'm not changing my mind. But God, it's hard." "It's hard because you're a good person," Jessica said. "But being a good person doesn't mean being a doormat. You can love your family and still have boundaries. You can care about their well-being and still refuse to sacrifice your own. That's not cruelty. That's self-preservation." I stayed at Jessica's until almost midnight, talking and venting and letting myself feel all the complicated emotions swirling inside me. By the time I drove home, I felt wrung out but clearer. More certain that I'd made the right choice even if it was the hardest one. When I got back to my condo, I stood in the doorway for a moment just looking at my space. My home. My sanctuary. The place I'd built with my own work and sacrifice. No one was going to take that from me. Not my parents. Not Michelle. Not guilt or obligation or family pressure. This was mine. And I was keeping it. I got ready for bed, plugged my phone into charge and climbed under my covers. For the first time in days, I felt like I might actually sleep. But just as I was drifting off, my phone buzzed with one more text. From another unknown number. This message made my blood run cold. "You think you're so high and mighty, turning your back on family. Wait until everyone knows what kind of person you really are. We'll make sure your reputation is destroyed. You'll regret this." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The message was clearly from one of my parents, probably my father based on the threatening tone. They were escalating, moving from guilt trips to actual threats. I screenshot the message and sent it to both David and Aunt Karen with a simple note. "They're threatening me now." David's response came first despite the late hour. "Save everything. Don't engage. If they keep threatening you, we'll get a restraining order if needed." Aunt Karen's message was shorter but just as firm. "This is harassment. Document everything. Don't respond. They're trying to scare you back into compliance." I put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode and lay back down, but sleep was impossible now. My parents were threatening to destroy my reputation, to turn everyone against me. Part of me was scared. But another part, the part that had stood in my doorway this morning and refused to back down, was just angry. They'd made their choices. They'd given Michelle everything. They'd lied to me. They'd tried to manipulate me. And now that I'd finally stood up for myself, they were trying to punish me for it. Well, let them try. I had the truth on my side. I had documentation. I had witnesses like Mr. Wu who'd seen and heard what happened. I had allies like Aunt Karen and David and Jessica who believed me and supported me. Most importantly, I had my integrity, my self-respect, my boundaries. And I wasn't giving those up for anyone. The threatening text message kept me awake most of the night. I kept replaying the words in my mind, trying to figure out who had sent it. The tone felt like my father, all bluster and intimidation, but I couldn't be certain. What bothered me more than the threat itself was the realization that my parents were willing to go this far. They weren't just disappointed or hurt. They were actively trying to punish me for refusing to comply with their plans. By the time dawn broke over Portland, painting my bedroom walls in soft gold light, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to hide or apologize or let fear control my actions. If my parents wanted to spread lies about me, I'd counter with the truth. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd protect myself legally. And if they wanted to cut me out of their lives entirely, well, maybe that was a blessing in disguise. I got up, made strong coffee, and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was compose a detailed email to myself documenting everything that had happened. The family dinner announcement. The confrontation at my door. The property records showing where the money went. Brittany's phone call about Michelle's financial mismanagement. The threatening text message. I included timestamps, exact quotes where I could remember them, and attached all the screenshots and documents I'd collected. If this situation escalated further, I wanted a clear chronological record of events. Once that was done, I forwarded the email to David with a note asking him to keep it on file in case I needed it for legal purposes. His response came within the hour, professional and reassuring. I've received your documentation and will maintain it securely. Based on the threatening message you received, I recommend we prepare a cease and desist letter. If your parents continue to harass or threaten you, we can pursue a restraining order. Let me know how you want to proceed. The idea of getting a restraining order against my own parents felt surreal and sad. But I'd read enough stories about family conflicts that spiraled out of control to know that sometimes legal protection was necessary. I told David to draft the cease and desist letter but hold off on sending it unless things got worse. I wanted to give my parents a chance to back down on their own, though I wasn't optimistic that would happen. I tried to focus on work, logging into my company's system and responding to emails that had piled up. My boss had checked in asking if everything was okay with my family emergency. I kept my response vague but professional, thanking her for her understanding and assuring her I'd be back in the office tomorrow. Maintaining my career, my professional reputation, felt more important than ever now. It was the life I'd built independent of my family, the proof that I could stand on my own. Around 10 in the morning my phone rang. Not from an unknown number this time, but from a name I recognized. My cousin Sarah, my mother's niece who I'd always gotten along with reasonably well. We weren't close, but we'd always been friendly at family gatherings. I debated whether to answer, then decided I might as well hear what she had to say. "Hey Sarah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Hey Becca," she said, and I could hear awkwardness in her voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just got off the phone with Aunt Pamela and she was telling me about what happened yesterday. I wanted to hear your side before I formed any opinions." I appreciated that she was at least asking rather than just accepting my mother's version as fact. "It's complicated," I said. "Did she tell you about the $700,000 they gave Michelle?" There was a pause. "She said they helped Michelle with a business investment," Sarah said carefully. "She didn't mention a specific amount." Of course she didn't. I gave Sarah the full rundown, keeping my emotions in check and sticking to facts. The house sale, the money transferred to Michelle for the townhouse and the business failing because of Michelle's mismanagement, my parents lying to me about losing everything and expecting to move in without even asking permission. Sarah was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Wow," she finally said. "That's not at all what Aunt Pamela told me. She made it sound like they were victims of some financial fraud and you refused to help them in their time of need." "What did she say exactly?" I asked, curious how my mother was spinning this. "She said they lost their house to bad investments and came to you for temporary help," Sarah said. "That you accused them of favoritism and kicked them out in front of moving people." She was crying pretty hard about it. Said she didn't understand how she raised such a cold daughter. The words stung even though I'd expected something like this. "Did she mention that they gave Michelle almost $450,000 to buy a luxury townhouse?" I asked. "Or that they could stay with Michelle in that townhouse they paid for?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "She definitely left those parts out." "Now you see why I refused to let them move in," I said. "They lied to me. They made choices that I had nothing to do with and then expected me to deal with the consequences. I'm not being cold. I'm setting boundaries with people who've never respected mine." "I get it," Sarah said. "And honestly, I don't blame you. Aunt Pamela has always had a blind spot where Michelle is concerned. We've all seen it. I'm sorry she's trying to make you the villain in this. I appreciate you calling to hear my side," I said. "Most people haven't bothered." "That's because most people don't want to get in the middle of family drama," Sarah said. "But I've always liked you, Becca. You've always been genuine and hardworking. If you say this is what happened, I believe you." We talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. After we hung up, I felt a small measure of relief. At least one person in the extended family knew the truth now. But I knew my mother was out there calling everyone she could think of, painting herself as the wrong party, gathering sympathy and support. The court of family opinion was probably already turning against me. Around noon, Jessica texted asking how I was holding up. I filled her in on the threatening text and my conversation with Sarah. She responded with a string of angry emojis followed by an invitation to meet for lunch. "I'm not letting you sit alone in your apartment dwelling on this," she wrote. "Meet me at that sandwich place on Burnside in 20 minutes. I agreed, grateful for the distraction. The sandwich shop was busy with the lunch crowd, but we managed to snag a small table by the window. Jessica showed up 5 minutes after me. Her hair windblown from biking over, her expression fierce and protective. "Okay," she said, sliding into her chair. "We need to talk strategy. Your parents are clearly escalating and you need to be prepared for whatever comes next." "I know," I said. "David's drafting a cease and desist letter. I've documented everything. I'm ready to get a restraining order if it comes to that." "Good," Jessica said. "But I'm also talking about social strategy. Your mom is clearly running a smear campaign. You need to get ahead of it." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, you need to tell your story," Jessica said. "Not in a dramatic public way but strategically. When people reach out to you asking what happened, tell them the truth. All of it. Don't minimize or sugarcoat. Let people know that your parents gave Michelle $700,000 and then lied to you about it. Let them know about the threatening texts. Control your own narrative before your mother controls it for you." It felt uncomfortable. The idea of sharing private family business with extended relatives and family friends. But Jessica was right. If I stayed silent, I was letting my mother define the story. And her version painted me as a heartless daughter rather than someone setting reasonable boundaries. We ordered sandwiches and Jessica walked me through how to handle different scenarios. If someone called to scold me about not helping family, I should calmly state the facts and ask if they'd make the same choice in my position. If someone tried to guilt-trip me, I should thank them for their concern but maintain that I was comfortable with my decision. If someone got hostile or threatening, I should document it and disengage. You're not responsible for managing other people's reactions to your boundaries, Jessica reminded me. Some people are going to be mad. Some people are going to think you're wrong. That's okay. You're not trying to win a popularity contest. You're trying to protect yourself from people who've shown they don't respect you. As we were finishing lunch, my phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Karen. I answered immediately. "Hey, Aunt Karen." "Rebecca," she said, and her voice had an urgency to it that made me sit up straighter. "I just got a very long, very dramatic voicemail from your mother. She's claiming you've stolen money from her and is threatening to press charges." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She said years ago she lent you $20,000 for your condo, and you never paid her back," Aunt Karen said. "She's saying you took advantage of her generosity, and now you're trying to cover it up by making up lies about Michelle. She's demanding you return the money with interest or she'll take legal action." "That's insane," I said, my hands starting to shake. "They gave me $10,000 as a gift. A gift I tried to refuse. There was never any mention of a loan or paying it back. I have emails from that time where my dad explicitly called it a gift to help me with my down payment." "I know, honey," Aunt Karen said. "I'm not calling because I believe her. I'm calling to warn you that she's apparently telling this story to anyone who'll listen. She's rewriting history to make herself look like the victim." "Send me those emails," I said immediately. "I'm forwarding them to my lawyer. This is harassment and defamation." "I'll send you everything I have," Aunt Karen said. "But Rebecca, I need you to understand something. Your mother is not going to back down easily. She's dug herself into this narrative where she's the wronged party, and you're the ungrateful villain. The more people who don't immediately side with her, the more desperate she's going to get." "What do you think she'll do?" I asked. "I don't know," Aunt Karen said honestly, "but I've seen her do some pretty manipulative things over the years when she doesn't get her way. Just be careful. Make sure your home security is good. Document everything. And don't engage with her directly no matter how much she tries to provoke you." After we hung up, I sat there feeling shaken. Jessica reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "My mom is telling people I stole money from her," I said. "She's threatening to press charges for a loan that never existed. The gift they gave me, she's now calling it a loan and demanding I pay it back with interest." "That's not how gifts work," Jessica said firmly. "And any lawyer would laugh her out of the room if she actually tried to pursue that. She's bluffing, trying to scare you into backing down." "I know," I said. "But it's working a little bit." "I'm scared." "Of course you are," Jessica said. "This is scary. Your parents are supposed to love and support you. And instead they're threatening and lying about you. That's a huge betrayal. But you're going to get through this. You have documentation proving the money was a gift. You have witnesses to what they tried to do. You have a lawyer. You're not defenseless here. I spent the rest of the afternoon at Jessica's apartment, not wanting to be alone. We worked side by side on our laptops, her on a freelance design project and me catching up on client work I'd been neglecting. It felt good to focus on something productive, something that had nothing to do with family drama. Around 5 o'clock, David called. I've drafted the cease and desist letter, he said. But before we send it, you should know I did some digging into that loan claim your mother is making. Based on the emails you sent me from the time of the gift, there's absolutely no legal standing for her to claim it was a loan. It was explicitly called a gift in writing by your father. If she tries to pursue legal action, she'll lose. That's a relief, I said. So what do? We send the cease and desist, David said. It will formally demand that your parents stop contacting you, stop making defamatory statements about you, and stop threatening legal action based on false claims. If they violate it, we have grounds for a restraining order and potential legal action against them for harassment and defamation. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Send it. I'll email it to them today with proof of delivery, David said. After this goes out, they might get angrier before they back off. Be prepared for that. But legally, you're protected. After we hung up, I felt both relieved and sad. It had come to this. Legal letters and threats of restraining orders. This was my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and we were communicating through lawyers. That evening, back at my own condo, I tried to create some sense of normalcy. I made dinner. A simple pasta dish that required just enough focus to keep my mind occupied. I poured myself a glass of wine and ate at my small dining table, looking out at the Portland skyline as the sun set. The city lights were starting to twinkle on, creating that beautiful transition between day and night. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from David confirming the cease and desist letter had been sent to both my parents via certified mail and email. There was no going back now. Within an hour, my phone started blowing up. 3 calls from unknown numbers that I didn't answer. A string of texts from my mother's number even though I'd blocked it, which meant she was using someone else's phone. The messages were unhinged, full of accusations and threats and declarations that I was dead to them. I screenshot everything and forwarded it to David without reading most of it. Each message was just more evidence of harassment if we needed it. Then my apartment buzzer rang. My heart jumped into my throat. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady. Rebecca Thompson. A male voice said, I have a delivery for you. I wasn't expecting anything. What kind of delivery? Certified letter, the voice said. Needs a signature. I buzzed him up, but I grabbed my phone and texted Mr. Wu across the hall. Someone is delivering a letter to me. If you hear anything concerning, please call the police. His response was immediate. I am watching through my peephole. You are not alone. The delivery was legitimate. Just a courier with an envelope that required my signature. But my hands were shaking as I signed for it. After he left, I opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter from my father. His handwriting was shaky, angrier than I'd ever seen it. The letter was filled with rage and disappointment, calling me ungrateful and selfish, saying I'd broken my mother's heart and destroyed our family. It ended with a line that made me feel sick. You were always the cold one. We should have known you'd turn on us eventually, just like you turned on your sister out of jealousy. Now you're alone and you deserve it. I set the letter down on my kitchen counter and stepped back from it like it might burn me. This was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cheered at my college graduation, who'd hugged me when I bought this condo. And now he was sending me letters telling me I deserved to be alone. The emotional whiplash was devastating. I called Aunt Karen, needing to hear a voice that wasn't hostile or threatening. She answered on the first ring. I've been waiting for you to call, she said. I figured things would get worse after they got that cease and desist letter. My dad sent me a letter, I said, my voice cracking. He said I deserved to be alone, that I was always cold, that I turned on them and Michelle. Oh honey, Aunt Karen said, her voice full of sympathy. That's the hurt and embarrassment talking. He's lashing out because you held a mirror up to their choices and they don't like what they see. But those words still hurt, I said. They hurt so much. I know they do, she said. When family rejects you, even family that's been toxic, it still cuts deep. But here's what I want you to remember. Their words say everything about them and nothing about you. You're not cold. You're not cruel. You set a boundary after they lied to you and tried to manipulate you. That's healthy, not heartless. We talked for over an hour, with Aunt Karen sharing more stories about her own journey to setting boundaries with my mother years ago. She'd gone through something similar, being called selfish and accused of abandoning the family when she'd moved to Seattle and stopped participating in the drama. It had been painful, but ultimately it had given her peace. You're going through the hard part now, she told me. The part where they fight back and try to guilt you into returning to the old dynamic. But if you hold firm, eventually they'll either accept the new boundaries or they'll move on to someone else to manipulate. Either way, you'll be free. After we hung up, I took the letter my father had sent and added it to my documentation folder. Then I did something that felt both symbolic and necessary. I took all the framed family photos I had displayed around my condo, the ones from holidays and graduations and family dinners where we all smiled like everything was fine, and I packed them away in a box. Not to throw them away, but to stop pretending that those moments represented the full truth of our relationships. The next morning I woke up feeling strange. Not quite peaceful, but something close to it. Determined, maybe. I'd survived the worst they could throw at me. The lies, the threats, the emotional manipulation. And I was still standing. I still had my home, my job, my real friends. I got ready for work with more care than usual, choosing my favorite blazer and doing my makeup. I needed to feel put together, professional, in control. At the office, my coworkers greeted me normally, with no indication they knew anything about my family drama. That was a relief. I dove into client meetings and strategy sessions, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of my work. During lunch, I sat in the small park across from my office building, eating a salad and watching people pass by. Families with young children, couples holding hands, elderly people feeding pigeons. All of them living their own complicated lives, dealing with their own struggles. My problems weren't unique. Lots of people dealt with difficult families, with betrayal and manipulation. I wasn't alone in this. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my cousin who'd called me the day before. Just wanted you to know I told my mom the truth about what happened. She's pretty shocked. I don't think she'll be speaking to Aunt Pamela for a while. I appreciated the update. It meant the truth was spreading slowly but surely. Not everyone would believe it or care, but at least I wasn't the only one who knew what had really happened. That afternoon I got an email from David. Your parents have been served with the cease and desist letter. I've also received a response from their attorney. Yes, they've actually hired a lawyer. My heart sank. They'd hired an attorney. This was escalating beyond anything I'd imagined. I called David immediately. What does the attorney's letter say? I asked. Mostly bluster, David said. They're claiming emotional distress, elder abuse, and demanding compensation for the alleged loan. But here's the thing. The letter is weak. Any competent attorney can see they don't have a case. The gift was documented as a gift. There's no evidence of abuse. And emotional distress claims require proof of actual damages. They're phishing. So what do we do? I asked. We respond professionally, stating that their claims are without merit, and that any further contact will be considered harassment, David said. Then we wait. Chances are, once they realize this is going to cost them legal fees with no chance of winning, they'll back off. But if they don't, then we file for a restraining order and potentially countersue for harassment and defamation, David said. You have a strong case, Becca. They're the ones who should be worried, not you. After work, I met Jessica for coffee at a place near my building. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened now?" They hired a lawyer, I said. They're claiming I abused them and stole money from them. They're actually trying to sue me. Jessica's expression went from concern to furious. Are you kidding me? After everything they did, they're trying to play victim in court? David says their case is weak, I said. But still. It's stressful. It's meant to be stressful, Jessica said. They're trying to exhaust you into giving up. But you can't let them win. You have to see this through. I know, I said. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. I wish they could just accept my decision and move on. Over the next week, things settled into a tense holding pattern. My parents' attorney sent one more letter, which David dismissed as continued posturing with no legal substance. The threatening texts and calls stopped, probably because their lawyer had advised them that harassment would only hurt their case. I went to work, came home, tried to maintain some semblance of a normal life. But the stress was wearing on me. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd lost weight because my appetite had disappeared. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart rate spiked, thinking it might be more drama. Jessica noticed and insisted I come to a yoga class with her. "You need to de-stress," she said. "You're carrying all this tension in your shoulders. You look like you're about to snap." The yoga helped more than I expected. Something about focusing on my breath and my body, about being present in the moment rather than worrying about what might happen next, gave me an hour of peace. I started going 3 times a week, finding it easier to sleep on the nights after class. Aunt Karen checked in regularly, sending me encouraging texts and calling every few days to see how I was holding up. She'd talked to my mother once, she told me, and it hadn't gone well. "Pamela is convinced she's the victim here," Aunt Karen said. "She's completely rewritten history in her mind." I tried to talk sense into her, but she just accused me of taking your side against family. "I'm sorry she dragged you into this," I said. "Don't be," Aunt Karen said. "I chose to be involved because someone needs to be a voice of reason. And honestly, I think your mom needs to hear from someone other than the people who just agree with everything she says." 2 weeks after the cease and desist letter was sent, David called with an update. "Their attorney has dropped them," he said. "What? Why?" I asked. Reading between the lines, "I guess they couldn't pay the retainer," David said. "Or the attorney realized they didn't have a case and didn't want to waste time on a losing battle. Either way, you're no longer facing a lawsuit." I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. "So it's over?" "For now," David said. "They could try to find another attorney, but I doubt they will. Most lawyers won't take a case this week. My advice is to maintain the no-contact boundary and keep documenting anything they send you, but I think the worst is over." That night, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Maybe I really was going to get through this. Maybe the storm was finally passing. I called Jessica to share the news, and she insisted on coming over to celebrate. She showed up with a bottle of champagne and Thai food and an enormous smile. "To Rebecca Thompson," she said, popping the champagne cork in my kitchen, "who stood up to her toxic family and won." We clinked glasses and ate pad thai on my couch, laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. I opened my curtains to let the October sunlight flood my condo, and made coffee in my quiet kitchen. My space. My home. My sanctuary. And for the first time since that family dinner at Mama Rosa's, I felt truly at peace in it. Over the following weeks, life gradually returned to normal. Or rather, to a new normal. One where I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's expectations and dysfunction. I threw myself into work, earning praise from my boss for a successful campaign launch. I spent more time with Jessica and other friends, building up the relationships I'd sometimes neglected when I was busy being the good daughter. I went on a weekend trip to the coast, renting a small cabin and spending 2 days walking on the beach and reading books and just being alone with my thoughts. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected. Sarah reached out occasionally to check in and share updates about the family gossip. Apparently, my parents had tried to move in with Michelle after all, and it had gone exactly as predicted. Michelle had let them stay for less than a week before kicking them out after a massive fight about them criticizing her lifestyle and financial choices. They'd ended up renting a small apartment in Beaverton with what little savings they had left. "Tara's business is officially closed," Sarah told me during one call. "The building is for sale and she's facing lawsuits from clients demanding refunds. Your parents are furious with her, but they still won't admit they made a mistake giving her all that money." "Some people never learn," I said. "And honestly, that's not my problem anymore." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. One evening about 6 weeks after the initial confrontation, I was curled up on my couch with a book when my doorbell rang. My entire body tensed. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Wu holding a small plant. I opened the door, smiling. "Mr. Wu, this is a surprise. I wanted to give you this," he said, handing me the plant. "It's a peace lily. Very resilient. I thought it would be good for your home." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That's so thoughtful. I also wanted to tell you that I am proud of you," he said. "I know it has been difficult, but you handled a hard situation with dignity." That means a lot, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. I wasn't always sure I was doing the right thing. Standing up for yourself is always the right thing, he said simply, even when others do not understand. After he left, I set the peace lily on my kitchen windowsill where it would get good light. Looking at it made me smile. It was a reminder that even in difficult circumstances, growth was possible. Resilience was possible. 3 months after that family dinner that changed everything, I was finally in a place where I could look back and feel something other than pain or anger. I felt proud. Proud that I'd recognized manipulation and refused to accept it. Proud that I'd set boundaries even when it was hard. Proud that I'd chosen my own well-being over toxic family dynamics. I still had moments of sadness, times when I missed the idea of having a close family, even if the reality had never matched that ideal. But mostly I felt free. Free to live my life on my own terms. Free to make choices without worrying about their approval. Free to be myself without constantly trying to prove my worth. Jessica and I were having brunch one Sunday morning when she asked if I'd heard from my parents at all. Not directly, I said. Sarah tells me they're still in that apartment in Beaverton. Still bitter about everything. But they've stopped trying to contact me. Do you think you'll ever reconcile? Jessica asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday if they actually acknowledge what they did and apologize. But I'm not holding my breath. And I'm okay with that. That's healthy, Jessica said. You're not responsible for fixing relationships that other people broke. I thought about what she said later as I walked home through the Pearl District. The trees were starting to change colors. The air had that crisp October bite to it. Portland felt like home in a way it never had before. Maybe because I was finally home to myself, not constantly trying to be what others wanted me to be. When I got back to my condo, I stood in the doorway for a moment just taking it in. The cozy furniture I'd chosen. The art on the walls. The books on the shelves. The peace lily thriving in the kitchen window. Everything here represented the life I'd built. The choices I'd made, the person I'd become. And no one could take that from me. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, pulling out the box of family photos I'd packed away months ago. I sat on my bed and went through them slowly, looking at the smiling faces, the staged moments of happiness. These people had been part of my story, had shaped me in ways both good and bad. But they didn't get to write my ending. That was up to me now. I selected one photo, a candid shot of me at my college graduation, laughing at something someone had said off camera. I looked happy and hopeful and ready to take on the world. That girl had become the woman sitting here now, stronger and wiser and more sure of herself than ever. I put that photo back on my bookshelf where I could see it. A reminder not of family drama or dysfunction, but of my own journey and resilience. The rest of the photos went back in the box, back in the closet. Maybe someday I'd want to display them again, or maybe not. Either way, I had time to decide. I had my whole life ahead of me, and for the first time in a long time, that thought filled me with excitement rather than anxiety. As I settled onto my couch that evening with a cup of tea and a good book, I realized something profound. I'd been so afraid of losing my family that I'd almost lost myself. But in standing up to them, in choosing my own well-being over their demands, I'd actually found myself. Found my voice. Found my strength. Found my peace. The sun was setting over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My condo was quiet and peaceful, exactly as it should be. This was my sanctuary. My home. Mine. And I was never giving that up again. Not for anyone. I picked up my phone and opened a voice memo. Something I'd started doing to process my thoughts. Sometimes I wondered if anyone would ever hear these recordings, or if they were just for me. But tonight, I felt like I had something worth saying. Family is supposed to be your foundation, I said into my phone. The people who support you and love you unconditionally. But what happens when they're actually the ones tearing you down? When their love comes with conditions and expectations that require you to sacrifice yourself. I learned something important these past few months. Real love doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Real love respects your boundaries. Real love tells the truth. And when the people who are supposed to love you can't do those basic things, it's okay to choose yourself. It's not selfish. It's survival. I stopped recording and set my phone down, feeling a sense of completion. My story wasn't over, but this chapter was. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. stronger, wiser, and finally truly free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.